journey through the pictorial history of war room in a culture that celebrates the weak. Show your support by standing with the rebels. Go to doitfluet.com or scan the QR code on your screen. Use the code RAV20 for 20% off your order. Stand with the rebels and never back down.
Happens when the fourth turning meets fifth generation warfare.
A commentator, international social media sensation, and former Navy intelligence veteran.
This is Human Events with your host, Jack Posobiec.
Christ is king.
Donald Trump knows that the Russians helped him win in 2016. There will always be an air of illegitimacy around the 2016 campaign.
President Trump is now accusing former President Barack Obama of treason. Today, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard didn't go that far, but did say newly declassified documents show that top Obama officials manufactured intelligence about Russian interference in the 2016 election right after former President Obama left office.
She says the former president was part of a conspiracy to subvert President Trump's 2016 victory and presidency. During a press briefing, Gabbard was asked if the information implicates Obama in criminal behavior.
She calls this, and I want to quote this directly, a treasonous conspiracy, and says that people, no matter how powerful they are or were at the time, must be held accountable. So what is the hard evidence here?
Yeah, hi, Reed. DNI Gabbard is making these very strong allegations on the basis of about 100 pages of declassified documents her office issued on the 17th of July. They include email chains, the draft of a president's daily brief, and summaries from a high-level meeting at the White House that have to do with a drafting of this comprehensive intelligence assessment of Russia's actions in the 2016 election.
The 2016 intelligence community assessment was carried out soon after President Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, when then-President Barack Obama directed former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper to review alleged Russian activity in the election. What followed was bad intelligence tradecraft and a politicization of the intel community. Ratcliffe wrote, agency heads at the time created a politically charged environment that triggered an atypical analytic process around an issue essential to our democracy.
The president has made it clear that he wanted these documents to be declassified. He wanted the American people to see the truth, and now he wants those who perpetuated these lies and this scandal to be held accountable. As for what accountability looks like, as the director said, it's in the Department of Justice's hands, and we trust them to move this ball forward.
The witch hunt that you should be talking about is they caught President Obama absolutely cold, Tulsi Gabbard. What they did to this country in 2016, starting in 2016, but going up all the way going up to 2020 of the election. They tried to rig the election, and they got caught. And there should be very severe consequences for that.
The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily here live, Washington, D.C. Today is July 24th, 2025, Anno Domini. We are here at the Homer Building, just one block away. The White House is right there outside that window, and we are here for General Flynn's National Security Strategy Summit. And what General Flynn has done here, and we'll be sitting down with the general, we just taped an interview that we're going to play for you in a few minutes, is go through an entire national security strategy for the United States, focusing on what the greatest threats to our country and our people are right now. And I'll give you a hint. It's a problem within, the threat within. We're not talking about foreign, enemies foreign and domestic. It's time to start focusing on the domestic enemies. That's the situation that presents ourselves with today. This is the situation that President Trump has come into in going back all the way to 2016, as Tulsi Gabbard did yesterday. And we're going to be breaking that down as well. I'm also going to be appearing later on a panel with Laura Logan and Congressman Eli Crane. So we've got a huge episode for everyone today. We are covering this in absolute full. The live stream is up on General Flynn's social media. So if you want to go and check that out and see the entire event in full, you can go see that there as well. But here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, and we're so gracious to Rob and Parker and the whole team for being able there to cover this in full and give us the team to be able to do this and put it together even on short notice. We're bringing you the National Security Strategy Summit. We're talking about the D&I disclosures. We're talking Epstein. We are talking everything. Don't go anywhere. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice.
Nothing will stand in our way, and our golden age has just begun.
This is Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Now it's time for everyone to understand what America First truly means. Welcome to the Second American Revolution.
And we're back. Jack Posobiec here, Human Events Daily. We had the opportunity, so gracious, to be able to sit down with a man that I served under in the United States military, in the intelligence services, the Defense Intelligence Agency, when I was sent down to Guantanamo Bay to work in the J2X interrogation cell down there as an interrogator analyst. The director of the DIA who sent me all those years ago was General Flynn, and at that time, I had no idea that I'd ever be able to have the opportunity to come to know General Flynn and go through this as a fly on the wall, watching what the deep state put him and his family through, and now to be able to know him in a personal capacity as well as members of his family. Just never experienced or never believed that I would have this experience. And so here we are. We've got that sit down, and we're going to walk through the biggest threats to the United States of America right now. Folks, we're so excited to be here. Human Events Daily, sitting on the sidelines of this really international security summit here with the one, the only General Flynn for a special Human Events Daily interview. General, thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely, Jack. It's a great honor, and I appreciate your friendship over the years.
Well, I appreciate that as well. Tell us a little about what is the National Security Strategy Summit and why did you decide to have it now?
Yeah, a few months ago, I took on the role of chairman of the Gold Institute for International Studies, and I've been a supporter of them for over a decade. And we got talking amongst ourselves, a small group. We have about 30 fellows that are part of it. About 2 months ago, and about 6 weeks ago or so, we decided let's hold our first conference here, where we're at right now in downtown Washington D.C. On national security. And so what I wanted to drive this particular conference, we're here in the midst of it today, I wanted to drive it by actually writing a national security strategy for the United States of America. And it's great. And one of my colleagues, one of my good friends, and a constitutional lawyer, brilliant guy, Adam Lovinger, was really the principal author. But we had a small team to do it. And, this is the actual document itself.
So this is a working group.
Oh yeah, this is and our goal with this, and it's a guide, like I say, for the direction of the United States. There hasn't been a national security strategy written really since about 2017. So our nation kind of goes based on executive orders and directives and campaign objectives and things like that. Donald J. Trump won the election. He put out a whole bunch of different things that they want to achieve. And in order for the rest of the government to have a clear understanding and direction, other than trying to catch everything that Trump has said or written about or signed off on, you create in government, in the bureaucracy, you create these documents. One is the national security strategy. That's the principal vision for the direction that the country goes. It is not a bipartisan document. A lot of people misunderstand that. It is a very partisan document because it's based on the President of the United States and the mandate that, in this case, President Trump won by. And so he won because he said certain things that the American people wanted. That's what the strategy is about.
Well, and this reminds me of, just to put it in people's perspective, and I remember serving as an intel officer, and you read these documents, you understand this is the strategy as dictated by the commander in chief. Right. It's like when George Kennan set out the long memo, and he was over at State Department, but that was the genesis, the nucleus of the strategy of containment of international communism, because international communism was viewed as the greatest threat at the time post Cold War, and so the idea was, are we gonna go to war with the Soviet Union? Are we gonna fight them militarily? What's the plan? And the option he said was containment comes in of, we're not going to fight it head on, but we're going to contain it to where it is now. Now, obviously, the threat has changed. So, just briefly, what do you define in this national security strategy document is the main threat today? Yeah,
the most important and the main threat that we are facing today is subversion from within.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's 100%. It's so clear. And here we are sitting here this week, and the Director of National Intelligence, who could not be more perfect for this particular role in this moment in U.S. history, Tulsi Gabbard, former Democrat, ran for Democrat presidential, was a presidential, in the primaries there for the Democrat Party, was chastised, was pretty much thrown out of her party.
Was called a Russian asset.
Was called a Russian asset. And so she's like in this perfect position to be the face for this subversion and talking about the subversion of our nation. And she's been just so courageous here the last couple of days in what she's done. But that's the principal threat. The other, the second and third components of it are those that are the alliance that's behind that threat. So there is a external alliance that's behind that threat. And that's this sort of strange bedfellows, right? The CCP, Russia, Iran, all these others who have made statements over a long period of time, decades, in some cases almost 100 years, where they've recognized the strengths of the United States of America, and they know that they can't take us on head on, right? I mean, that was the result of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. So what they did was they started to infiltrate our system. And they've been doing that for a long time. And it's very clear. There's all kinds of examples, and we're talking about that today. The third component of this is really how does the rest of the world see America and the regional partners? And what we have in the audience with us, we have over 50 ambassadors. We have a third of the world here that's sitting in this conference today that are hungry to understand the complexity of what is happening here in the United States right now, because we're trying to explain it. The president, Tulsi Gabbard and others are trying to explain exactly what's going on in our country. And it's not easy. I mean, you and I, guys like us and others in the world of social media have been following a lot of this, but it is still very complex. But in order for the country to kind of survive, there is this thing we call a constitutional order. And the constitutional order is really, we the people. We're the ones that stand up and demand accountability of our government. And that's what's starting to happen even more so now. And that's a big, big deal. But we address that and we put into the perspective of how do we move forward into the future, and things change over time.
So looking at it from that perspective, we saw the DNI's release yesterday. We saw this incredible press conference. We've never seen anything like that. I'm sure in all your years of service, you've never seen anything like that.
When we use the word unprecedented,
completely from the pulpit of the White House, from the pulpit, from that, and it is a pulpit, right? The pulpit of the press briefing room, to have a director of national intelligence say that a previous president was engaged in treasonous conspiracy. What steps then do you take next to restore the constitutional order?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we've seen is, this discussion about a strike force and all that. The American people are losing their patience. I know that, and we can see it, and we can tell from your audience, and certainly from a lot of the people that I talk to on a daily basis. So there's not a lot of patience for long investigations. The evidence is clear. The evidence is there. We've had IG investigations. We've had lots of FOIA releases. We've had, legal cases like my own that have shown additional conspiracy and additional treasonous behavior in some cases, and certainly the various reports that have come out from Congress. The one that Tulsi exposed yesterday from the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. I think that was Devin Nunes's report.
Yes.
I mean, so there's a lot of evidence out there, and
I'll even throw one out. The name of whichever senior official of the Obama White House that leaked your private conversations to David Ignatius of the Washington Post, that is a criminal act. Right. That is FISA-derived intelligence. That is top secret SI, all the compartments, and walks right over to the Washington Post. Worse than anything that that people accuse Assange and all these other Chelsea Manning, Bradley Manning, whatever, of doing, and yet that name, Susan Rice, comes to mind, has never once been indicted, identified, or charged. Just
So that the direction and the speed that we are going to have to move, and this is really where only the president can do that. The president of the United States, I think, is going to have to sit there with his team and sit there and go, okay, folks, here's what we now know. There cannot be any more of these, well, we'll see what happens, or, I'm going to leave this up to the Attorney General and to the Department of Justice. There is a justice system that we do have that must be put into high gear, but we have to clean this up. And I think only the president can do this. So he's going to have to pull that team together, get them in the Oval Office, and sit there and go, okay, what are the steps that we must take in order to satisfy what it is that just happened to the country? Because Lee Smith wrote a great book called The Permanent Coup.
Of course.
And when we think about 2016 and 2017, that was an attempted coup. When we think about 2020 and 2021, that was a coup. The rigging of an election. Then now we talk about 2024 and 2025. That was our sort of counter-revolution. That was our way of the American people saying enough is enough. And we fought tooth and nail in that campaign season to get Donald Trump over the victory line once again. And he took, he took a bullet to the head because of it. Yes. But here we are in 2025. Now, this is 6 months into this administration, and the coup still continues. We're still finding subversives inside. We call them fellow travelers, right? In the national security strategy, we describe them as fellow travelers who have taken on the Marxist, communist, socialist headgear, and they're wearing it, and they're wearing it in the trenches of the deep state still. And there are people that are still being fired, still being discovered, and that's just in the institution of government.
Joe, but, you know, and I saw this when I was serving in the intel community. Right. Obviously, you've faced the full brunt of it. But for 15 years, they broke apart our intel agencies, and they found people. They found these fellow travelers, and if they understood, and they did this on the military side as well. They used the war colleges to find this. When Obama went, just like in the private sector, when they went for the colleges, the same thing in the military. Right. So if you were a fellow traveler, you were identified, you were promoted, you were given a star, you were brought up through the ranks. And so we've got an entire system now of these people that have been in place that goes all the way back to 2008. And when I talk to people about this all the time, and I say, look, it's incredible what Tulsi Gabbard and her team have done in a very short time. As you say, nothing short of unprecedented, but that deeper issue that your document is referencing here is only going to change when you crack this thing open.
Right. And I think that the drumbeat, and there's no better person to do it than President Trump. So he has had this constant drumbeat, and it really goes back to his first presidency. But now more and more has been revealed. So there's got to be a constant drumbeat. And the drumbeat is to remind people what is most important to our country, and that's this constitutional order, the fair rule of law system that has gotten us to this point in time, right, to almost 250 years.
A single tier of justice.
So there's got to be that, but there also has to be, accountability. And if there's two things our founding fathers taught us, it was courage, which Tulsi Gabbard is demonstrating, certainly President Trump is, and accountability. They were accountable they knew that if it didn't work out, they were all going to be hung by the British. And so here we are now. If this doesn't work out, if we're not able to overcome this deep state, we'll call it the deep state, this subversion that's going on, if we're not able to overcome that, and there are internal forces and there are external forces that are continuing to promote that, then we could lose our country. We may not have another 250 years of existence.
What it achieves for any of America's adversaries or the constellation of BRICS nations, similar to containment, right? Because you don't need to confront the United States head on, but it creates this strategic deterrence.
Absolutely.
And so they can deter the United States from being able to act on a global scale because we're being flooded by migrants. Our cities are overrun with crime. We're dealing with all the subversives in our own government. We try to do something, it gets blocked by some judge or something like this. It's an operation.
Yeah.
And I even said yesterday, 2020, I call that a color revolution. 2024, we ran our counter revolution, as you say. Going back 2016, 17, Russiagate, I think the word hoax is just a little bit off, because I don't know if it describes what this was. This was an intelligence operation.
Yeah,
this was it wasn't something they stumbled into. Right. This was an intelligence operation, a domestic intelligence operation run against the American people and the president that they elected.
Right. So to jump a little bit, because what you're hitting on is really important. I think the audience, from my perspective, I think they just understand. In the 2014 timeframe, winter of 2014, the United States of America ran a color revolution in Ukraine.
Yes.
Okay. And the Ukraine and the mess that's in Ukraine right now, the government, the overthrow or the regime change of the government of Ukraine, that actually happened. We were doing that. The United States of America ran that
duly elected president was thrown out.
And so fast forward, and they really thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win in 2016. They really, they believed it, right?
Yes.
Donald Trump, boom, thank God, he wins 2016. So when he won, and he defeated their initial components of their strategic plan, they then met. And now we know on the 8th of December is a really, really important date, because that's sort of the initiation by Barack Obama, where he ordered these guys. And this is now out in public, right? Where he ordered his national security apparatus, particularly the intelligence component of it, to kick into high gear, essentially a color revolution on par with what we had just done in Ukraine. And that color revolution began in earnest on that day, because they had already had some of the other planning in effect. It just didn't work to get Hillary elected.
And I have to ask you, since we are here live, that the thing that jumped out so much to me, and this has never been reported before, so I see all these, in the AP, the Associated Propaganda is out there today saying that, oh, this Tulsi didn't have the receipts. This doesn't prove what she said. Excuse me. There's nothing new. It's never before been reported that the president's daily brief was withheld on that day, December 8th. Have you ever heard of a president's daily brief being withheld?
Never.
No, that'd be like saying the New York Times
or the
changed,
intelligence adjusted.
So that would be like saying the Wall Street Journal isn't going to publish today, or the New York Times isn't going to. It's a whole system that is in constant churn, that's always putting out product. It always comes out. There's never not a president's daily brief. That's just not. You have to. And there's only be
in this world, and it's unthinkable.
It's unthinkable. It's completely unthinkable. So that jumped out at me, and I realized though that for a lot of people out there, they said if you're not in the intelligence cycle, you don't understand how big of a deal that is. So
if you're looking at, like somebody said, we got smoking guns, and then you have gas poured out there. Tulsi took the match out the other day and lit the whole thing on fire. This to me, and again, this is I believe is probably the greatest crime committed in the history of the United States. So this gets back to, and I think what is really important, and this is looking forward, right, as we are trying to do here in this conference, to be sort of forward-leaning as to what's next, right? The American people are like, okay, I got it. We've been hearing about it. What's next? So we really have to organize sort of for combat, right? We got to organize in what you would do in the military. You'd gather the forces. That's why I say President Trump's going to have to really have a heart-to-heart with his team and go, okay, we're going to have to figure out what's the plan, what's the strategy, what's the direction we're going to move forward, and then how fast we need to make this happen. That's number one. The second thing is, what are the most important priorities? Because you and I have had, before we came on, we talked about different things that are going on, Epstein files and the Ukraine war and the difficulty of extracting ourselves from war, which is something that President Trump, I know, desperately wants to do. He wants to be the peacetime president, and he's still fighting tooth and nail to do that.
And there's a lot of people politically who want to take that from him.
We have massive issues here still inside the country that were promulgated by the previous administration, where they allowed 20 million illegals to come in. We've got the Chinese incursion of fentanyl, which is a weapon system. It's very deadly. We've had, more than a couple of 100,000 this past year killed in action on the streets of America. So we got all these issues. What I want the president to sort of reiterate, and to make sure that he's telling the American people, here are my priorities. Here's the priorities that we must have in order for the United States to achieve a level of what I call primacy, right? Primacy, meaning we are the dominant nation in the world. We got to got to check our egos at the door. We got to maintain our benevolence, but we're the top dog. And in order to stay the top dog, not as we're patting ourselves on the back, but in order to stay the top dog, we've got to fix right here at home. Yes. That's the beauty of America First. It's not being isolationist, like the media will try to describe Trump. He wants to be an isolationist. No, right. Primacy means we make sure we take care of our home first, get that right, and we have to do that now with everything that we know. That's and a lot of people
Fortress America.
That's right, Fortress America, and we got to focus on America first. Get our house in order. Once we get our house in order, and we can juggle. Trump is very capable of juggling multiple crystal balls, right? So he's got a great team of people to be able to do that. He's got a lot of people on the outside that are influencing and helping out. We have the advent of alternative media now, so we don't have the lies coming out of the media that has just been part of this institution that's been trying to destroy this country. And thank God we have that. I mean, we're going to talk here at this National Security Conference about alternative media. And that's why I appreciate you being here and being part of that, because that alternative media gives a voice to the voiceless, gives a voice to the American people to be able to say, hey, we still exist. We, the people, still want our life, our liberty, our pursuit of happiness. And actually, we're able to do that through alternative media. If we didn't have that alternative media, God knows what would happen. I mean, Trump. Right. I call this last presidential election.
We'd all be in jail.
No, I'd be in jail. I mean, I call this last presidential election the podcast presidency.
Yes, because
President Trump finally realized it's not about going on Fox or going on CNN or the big three. It's actually, there's a market of people out there that represent millions and millions of Americans that are hungry for honesty, hungry for the truth. And you're not going to get it out, sadly, you're not going to get it out of the mainstream media. You're now getting it out of all these other voices, and you being one of the big ones in the country and, frankly, in the world. Because why we have a third of the world sitting out here? Because they're listening and they're watching. And I used to be able to say, as an American, as a military guy, as a military leader, we'd go around the world and we'd be like, hey, be like us, right? Be like America. We would try to talk to these other countries, and you go around and you handshake and you say, hey, you see how great America is? We want you to be more like us. And we can't do that right now. It's very embarrassing. It's an embarrassing situation.
So true.
But the one thing that we are allowed to do inside the family, right, inside the boundaries of the American family, is we're able to take care and deal with our pressures here, on our own in this constitutional order that we have.
Let me ask while I have you, because talk about the voice of the voiceless. The biggest story right now, and you touched on it there, is that I keep getting asked about is these Epstein files, the Epstein situation. Obviously, the president, it's become a hot potato. Right. There's no question about that. It's a sticky situation. It's something where obviously the media is now jumping on it, trying to do everything they can to dredge up these decades, in some cases, old stories, trying to connect the president to Epstein. And I think the reason they're doing that is because they know that if he actually does start releasing the names that are in there, that it's going to be people that are connected with them.
Right. Well, and I don't think what the American people need to see or want to see is the transcripts of the various things. I think what the American people need to
they want justice.
Hear, they want justice. But the rollout for this, and I've been very public about this, the rollout for this was a disaster. But let's put that aside, because it's still very important and it's still very visible. And I know the president has come out with different posts about it and his own statements. And no, that's fine. That's how he wanted to deal with it at that time. But this is really about children. And if there's a universal issue that was not grabbed hold of and really clearly understood by the people around the president, was this notion that children were abused. And they were abused certainly by Epstein, and maybe they were abused by other people in this elite establishment. So if we give somebody the death penalty in the state of Florida for deviant sexual abuse of a child, which I think Florida has that ability, and that's a good thing.
Well, I think you just signed it.
Right. So if we do that to some deviant down at the grassroots level because he's sexually abusing a child, well, elites are, if they're doing the same thing, and I say elites, and that's a very general word to use, but if that's happening, people want to know that, and they want to make sure that those people are held, to account, just like some other guy, some other, jack on the street, right? So this is about children, and make it about children, make it about the protection of children, that we cannot have even the people at the highest social classes get away with the abuse of children.
So what do you make of this?
What I would say about this, and I'm sorry, Jack, what I would say about this is that the president needs to find really, really trusted individuals in this country, maybe outside of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, because that's kind of the fox in the hen house. Find really trusted individuals and let them review all this stuff. Tell the American people that you're going to do this, and whatever they discover, that will be then exposed to the American people with the protection of the children that were abused, of course, and and the victims. But that has to happen, and I think if that happens, but like I said just 5 minutes ago, there are other priorities in the world today, this very chaotic, this very complex world.
And then the White House and the cabinet would be able to face those things separately.
Exactly. And so I think the president needs, and there's people out there, bipartisan people that will help get to an answer that is satisfactory, so the American people can understand and say, look, the president, this administration understands that this is really about children and the abuse of children. And we, the people of the United States of America, I don't care what color you are, we will not stand for that. And so, enough said on that, because I think that there's, and that's a huge issue, but there's so many other problems that the president of the United States has to deal with on a daily basis. So the people around him have got to help him. They've got to help him to better deploy this issue because it isn't going to go away.
The one that has come up and has been this Ghislaine Maxwell, and she's raised her hand, and having people, I don't always talk about it, but I served a tour at Guantanamo Bay in a J2X capacity under the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yep.
And who was the director of the DIA back then? By the way, who was that guy?
It was a hot place for you to be.
Yeah, it was a real firecracker. Right. We had this 3-star man. You should have seen him, coming storming through the hallways. But that's when General Flynn was the director of DIA. But I remember those custodial interviews that we would hold down at Guantanamo Bay. It seems like Ghislaine Maxwell is interested in cooperating. Right. Should we trust her? Should we take this cooperation? How should the president play this?
Well, everything that somebody says in her case, because people go, well, she's in jail, so she's going to say anything she can to get herself a deal or whatever. But, all of that can be, verified. It all can be verified.
You corroborate. That's exactly what, when you had us down there, half the time, sure, we're talking to the detainees. Right. The other half, you try to verify what they said. You're working on because you have the multi-suite of intelligence capabilities that we have. Right. Okay, the guy says he was in Pakistan. All right, track his phone. Was he in Pakistan that week,
And you can tell by either communications or you can tell by money, financial transactions.
Whatever it is.
It's so easy to validate, particularly at that level. And especially when you have all the resources of the United States government and certainly the United States intelligence system. So yeah, all that can be corroborated. She would not go in there and start making stuff up because it would just compound the problems that she's already facing in prison. So, but that's got to be dealt with, and it's going to have to happen. And the president just needs to be shrewd about it. And he's probably one of the most shrewd people on the planet. And he knows what he's got to do. And he's got this other dimension of America, and certainly the world that he's dealing with. I mean, the trade deals, recent trade deals that he's been able to cut out, at least out in the Pacific, I think 6, 7, maybe 8 trade deals out there. That alone, the wars that are still raging.
Having Japan on board is absolutely our key ally against the Chinese Communist Party. So you look at what he's done, the Japanese, the Philippines, Korea comes next. What's he doing? Indonesia, Vietnam. What's he doing? He's circling China.
Right. It's actually a brilliant strategy, and he's probably one of the greatest economic presidents that we've ever had, for sure.
There's no question.
But we have to allow, to a degree, with the exposure of what we are now seeing, what we talked about earlier about what Tulsi's putting out. And I think what we're going to find is that was the attempted coup. The actual coup was 2020 in the election. And I think that what we're going to find, and I'm certain of this, that when Tulsi and others around her and her team, and she's been brilliant about keeping this close hold too, which is really powerful.
And you don't usually see that in Washington.
It's almost impossible. So what we're going to find in 2020, which I think was a coup, the stolen election of 2020, what we're going to discover there is even worse. It's going to be even worse. And, I've said publicly here that the ringleader there was Obama as well. So we're facing an interesting time. And we always use the word unprecedented. It's unprecedented. This is unprecedented. Nobody's going to sit there and tell me that we've been through this before. We've never been through something where we've had the head of our U.S. intelligence, and the president knows this, get out there and say that a former president attempted to essentially a treasonous act against a duly elected president to undermine the United States of America.
And by the way, that's a party that she was part of that she's now indicting. Right. And so she's taken all of her credibility and put it on the line for this. Yeah. And you've never seen Tulsi do something like this before.
I mean, if you want to see that, if you want to see a demonstration of courage, watch her. And for her to stand there at the bully pulpit of the White House press room, she's not just talking to the people in the room. She's talking to the world.
Whole world.
And the world just saw the United States of America sort of undress itself in very public way. And that's the beauty and the complexity of our Constitution. That's what I say when I talk about the constitutional order. That's the strength. And I don't want our enemies. Don't, for those that are listening.
You're never going to see the Russians do that or the Chinese do that.
Don't misunderstand. Don't underestimate that what we're going through is a weakness. Look at it, and let me tell you something. It is a strength of this country.
Well, that's what's going to move us forward. I think it's a message to the Russians too, because this is in that not to get on a tangent, but this is within that 50-day period where President Trump said that he wants a reset with Russia. So here he is saying, "Look, we've got the receipts on Russiagate."
Yeah.
Of course, a little bit louder. We'll cut that off. So here he is now within that 50-day period, and she's coming out saying, look, this was not Russia. Mm-hmm. So that's, to me, perhaps an opening for the Russians to be able to respond. Yeah. And so all these moves are happening. He's putting the strategy in. General Flynn, incredible work here with the national security strategy document. Congratulations on the summit. A third of the world's ambassadors here, official representatives here in the room. It only speaks to the ascendance of the people's movement, not just in politics, but hopefully in national security as well. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely, Jack. Thanks. Appreciate you being here, too, being part of this.
God bless. Oh, I wouldn't miss it. All right, folks, we're back here. Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are a homeowner, you need to listen to this, and all patriots need to listen, because if you got a home, did you know that in today's AI and cyber world, scammers are now stealing home titles, and in fact, your equity is their target. Here's how it works. Criminals can forge your signature, and they only need one document to do that. Then they'll take a fake notary stamp, pay a small fee, and then boom, just like that, your home title has been transferred out of your name. They then take out loans using your equity, or even sell your property, and you won't even know it happened until you get a collection or foreclosure notice. So, when's the last time you ever actually checked your home title? If your answer is, well, never, you need to do something about it right now. That's why I've partnered with Home Title Lock, so you can find out today if you're already a victim. Use promo code POSO at HomeTitleLock.com and you'll get a free title history report and a free trial of their $1 million triple lock protection. That's 24/7 monitoring of your title, urgent alerts to any changes, and if fraud does happen, they'll spend up to $1 million to fix it. Don't be a victim. Protect your equity today. Go to HomeTitleLock.com and use promo code POSO. That's HomeTitleLock.com, promo code POSO. HomeTitleLock.com, promo code POSO.
You know, you talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, Jack Posobiec, here we are back, Real America's Voice. Today I appeared on a panel with Lara Logan and Congressman Eli Crane. We've got a piece of that for you right now. If you want to see the entire thing, it'll be up on social media, and we'll also be releasing it as a separate podcast. Here's that panel right now on alternative media and the power of it.
Jack, I've watched you, from the beginning, kind of come up this ladder here. You come out of the Navy as an intelligence, from the intelligence community in the Navy. And I watch your style, okay? But for the audience here, I'd really like you to tell everybody how your style from that intelligence community affects and shapes the media that you do, and how big of a factor is that in the strength of alternative media?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks again to General Flynn, the entire team, for putting this together, for having us on. I'll mention it because most people don't always know the backstory that when I was in Navy intelligence, I was at one point assigned to the Defense Intelligence Agency. I was deployed to Guantanamo Bay, worked in the J2X interrogation cell down there in the Human Operations Center, and the director of the DIA at that time, all those years ago, is sitting in the front row right here. That was General Flynn's, who I served under in the DIA. So a lot of people don't realize how much of a backstory that so many of the people in this room have, that through a completely precipitous series of events have now ended up in this place. And so when you talk about the style that I have is the style that I was trained on as first in intelligence. I was enlisted and then became later an officer. And I remember always being taught, be good, be brief, be gone, and have the bluff. Put the bottom line up front. Remember the bluff, General? So it's you've got to have that big headline, you'd say headline in today's parlance, but it was, what's the so what? What is the so what? I could put up a briefing slide in front of you and walk you through all of the different connections and all of the different background on any specific problem set, whether it be a terrorist cell, whether it be a Chinese Communist Party influence network, whatever it might be, smuggling, etc. But if I'm not giving you the so what right up front, then I'm wasting your time and I'm wasting everyone's time. And so when I bring my approach to, whatever it is you call I do, independent media, that's something that's always deeply ingrained in my mind. Be good, be brief, be gone, and be clear. If you're not speaking with clarity, then you're not properly communicating, because effective communication begins with that. And, it's so interesting looking at, as you say, this journey from being inside the intelligence services to now in independent media. I took my children to the International Spy Museum, which is, just a few blocks away here, for the first time ever, this new one they've constructed. And I said, I said, wow, they should really call this place the Constructed Reality Museum, because that's what it is. It's a museum not about the intelligence community. It's actually a museum created by the intelligence community to give you a vision of a constructed reality that has some resemblance to reality, but everything's just slightly off. And what do I mean by this? I mean, this is the cover story. This is the false reality that you would get if you read the pages of the Washington Post or the New York Times, or if you're watching CNN and listening to NPR. This is the reality where, of course, Russia hacked the election, where COVID-19 was a natural origin virus that came from apparently a bat making out with a pangolin and ending up in some soup in a wet market. And if you say anything that's beyond Hunter Biden's laptop, again, Russian disinformation, all of these things, which we know and all of us have learned are completely true. And everyone knows the list. I could go on about these things. But when you walk into that Constructed Reality Museum, you realize the amount of money and the amount of force and the amount of huge dollar bank accounts that are put into maintaining this illusion of a false reality, recruiting people who are willing to go along with the false reality, as you encountered in mainstream media, because they don't actually push beyond the boundaries of that accepted narrative, whatever the consensus bias is. Climate change was another example of this for a long time. You notice they don't even talk about that one anymore. And so having been in the military and then serving in places, Guantanamo Bay, for example, was a place that was completely lied about in the media. And I guarantee you, every single person in this room, with the probable exception of Tim Ballard, who just walked in, because that's a guy who knows the truth, you have a vision in your mind of and a picture of these places that exists because the media painted it for you, or Hollywood painted it for you, or it was an accepted narrative, a constructed reality that was implanted in your mind. And what did we see most recently? DNI Gabbard and Joe Kent was just here. So she was in the White House yesterday. And for the first time ever, we've seen someone actually totally shatter that veil from a position of power like she's done. This has never happened before in the history of the United States, where the director of national intelligence has come out and for the first time told the truth about what actually happened, that in this instance, Russiagate was a domestic intelligence operation that was run on the American people and their president in conjunction with the entire mainstream media. And that's something that, of course, the media is doing everything they can to silence, because it's an indictment on their entire process.
Excellent. Excellent. It's very hard for folks in the military, and the media to give up the microphone. I appreciate how you guys are passing it back and forth. Congressman Crane, also give him a round of applause. Served in the United States military, several combat deployments as a Navy SEAL. And speaking of deployments and speaking of the military, we know intel drives maneuver. You're set in a position right now with our government where you get to see things, you get to hear things. We are doing this pivot to China thing that's going to be happening here pretty soon. But while that's happening, what message do you have to the alternative media to not take their eyes off of any certain direction and be only focused on China? What else is happening out there that people need to make sure they don't forget about?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I realize many of my friends and allies in the room are, very focused on China, and they have very good reasons to do that. They are definitely a threat to the United States, and Jack and Laura can go into great detail on some of the reasons why. And I agree with them. They are a definite threat to the United States. But one thing that I will say to everybody in this room is, don't take your eyes off of radical Islamists. Okay. I've studied their theology. I've studied their eschatology, and I think they often get underrated for a few reasons. One of them is when we look at threats around the world, we can look at nation states, we look at their economies, we look at their resources, and we also look at their weaponry and their military capabilities. And that's an area where I think they often get overlooked because they don't rank high when it comes to a couple of those things. When you study their theology, some of these young kids are being taught that if they are killed in the line of jihad, they'll go to heaven and get 70 virgins. That's really dangerous. And when you compare it to some of the other nation states that we often rank high on that list, they're not fighting for the same reasons. They're not fighting because they believe that, it's divine and that God will bless them, for fighting infidels and, toppling the West. So I think that it's important that we do not take our eyes off of radical Islam.
And when you look at that list, you're saying some don't rank as high as others. Where are we on the top of that list that people should make sure they don't take their eye off? Which country, which group, which organization, which terror cell, where at?
Well, I think that if you look at it and you right now, another reason that they're often, I would say, underestimated is because they're spread out all over the place, right? If you look at the Middle East, there's a lot of infighting. But if you look at what they want to do and reestablish a caliphate, which I do believe in the future will happen, that's why I said radical Islam and jihadists, because I do believe at some point they will be able to reunite, get past all of their differences. I could make a biblical case for it as well, but this is one of the dangers I see, is that I think as we pivot, and again, I understand the reasons why, but I think that there's going to be a focus taking off of radical Islam. And I think one of the other dangers to it is that the United States of America, because our military is so strong, our military is built to take on nation states,
right,
not necessarily fight insurgencies. And so I think it's one of the reasons that radical Marxism, communism, and socialism have been so effective and so destructive here in the United States, because this isn't what, our Department of Defense is built to do, right? And that's one of the reasons I think that radical Islam, it will be such a big threat in the years to come.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Please add to it.
I want to put that in the context of the media. So I said the shift started in 2016. I should really have said that the shift became apparent in 2016, because if you actually look at Congressman Crane is 100% correct. But if you look at the playbook of radical Islamists, first of all, it's identical to the Marxist playbook in many respects. Unrestricted warfare is unrestricted warfare, whether it's done by the Chinese or what we call radical Islamists. But radical Islam is a term that is in itself created to deceive, because having studied the Quran, you will know that it's not actually radical to fight for the restoration of the Ummah, which is the Islamic people and the Sharia throughout the world. In fact, it's as mainstream as Islam gets to believe in that as the established. So it's not a radical idea. It might be groups that use radical tactics, but we're the ones who gave it that name. And that's where the role of the media comes in. And if you actually look at the term Islamophobia, you cannot date that term prior to the Obama administration. It didn't exist. It wasn't a concept. So this is why history for journalists matters. So what happens with the rise of independent media is you get a lot of people that can grab a microphone and can grow an audience. And if they make a deal with a social media company, they can get a big audience pretty quickly. They can come out of nowhere. I don't know. They can come out of the CIA like Sean Ryan, and they can be very popular very quickly. And they can stay there as long as somebody else decides to keep them there. But what is it they're not doing? What are they not? We are students. Journalists are students, not experts. Any journalist presented to you as an expert is already lying to you, because we're not experts. I can do a series for 5 years. I can cover nuclear energy, and I will never have the knowledge of a nuclear scientist who's truly an expert. So what we are supposed to be is students of history, students of culture, students of modern popular, governments and who are the players of the time. We literally are students of everything, but journalists have stopped being that. Number one, daily news and immediate deadlines are the death of that kind of level of knowledge and investigation, but they're necessary. So it's important for journalists really to be able to transition beyond those things, right? You can be a daily news journalist for a while and really get hard news skills, or work for a news agency and have that instant hard news nose. But what you're supposed to build over time is context and knowledge. And that is supposed to be merged with principles. But what we have is journalists who are not curious. The reason you don't know the stories that Jack's telling you about is because our media lies by omission. So it's not just what they print that's not true. It's what they don't tell you. You get slices of the truth, because the best propaganda is built on kernels of truth. When you make something up, it's very hard to keep it there, because what happens? It's a lie that has no legs, and it keeps collapsing on itself, and you keep having to tell more lies. And as you do that, you create what? You create a trail of guilt, which is exactly where we are with Tulsi Gabbard today. Right, with what she's revealing, because the lie of Russia collusion had constantly propped up, and now that's crumbling.
All right, folks, and that was just a piece, really just a tiny piece of the panel that we did today. If you want to check that out, go look on all of my social media pages, all of my podcast sites, Apple, Spotify, and also the Real America's Voice podcast. Don't forget to download the Real America's Voice app, and also check them out on iHeart. It's available all over the place. So convenient to use. I love using it myself. You guys are as well. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.